Yo, yo, yo. Alex Jones in the house. What's up, people? It's the Alex Jones of post academia in the house. How's everyone doing? All right. Coming out with some big questions right off the bat. Like, Justin, what do you think of Bertrand Russell? I'll have to mull that over for a minute. Michael James has to run, so briefly wants to get a very important question in, which is, are people who are against putting babies in boiling water considered SJWs? Of course they are. Clearly, their only interest in keeping babies out of the boiling water is virtue signaling, my friend. If they actually cared about keeping babies out of boiling water, they would be like effective altruists calculating advanced models for optimizing the appropriate charity format for doing so. How's everyone doing tonight? All right. Do white people with sunburn count as POC? That's a tough one. I personally am sympathetic to the philosophy of transracialism. I'm in the Rachel Dolezal camp of race theory, and just like I'm, sympathetic to the self-determination of trans folks, I feel sympathetic to the self-determination of people choosing different races personally. So I would say that if you want to cultivate an extreme sunburn and make a commitment to an alternative racial identity, then white people with sunburn can count as people of color, potentially. Not necessarily. That's for sure. How's everyone? What's going on? I have a few different things I'd like to share with you this evening. Mostly updates on all my projects. I've been working hard to improve a bunch of things, and yeah, I've made some progress on some fronts that I'm kind of interested to share, and some upcoming news a little bit. So I'll spend some time talking about those things. And then I have also, I thought that maybe I would talk a little bit at some point about some of the stuff I've been reading, because one of the greatest benefits of leaving academia is I have more time to read. Yeah, some people find this perhaps surprising, but yeah, I mean, as an academic, you would think part of the game is, reading a lot, but you do a fair amount of reading, but it's not real reading. It's kind of pressurized, instrumentalized reading, mostly, that you do in academia. So you're like reviewing journal manuscripts, or you're reading stuff for a review that you have to do, or maybe you're reading certain papers because a reviewer tells you that you have to cite it. So there's a lot of kind of frantic, rushed reading, at least in my experience in academia. But other than that, I didn't have much time or energy to do what I think of as real reading, which is, reading for personal pleasure and curiosity. And in that kind of, it's a very particular kind of leisure, really. It's a particular state of mind that you only really click into if you are truly relaxed and truly sort of evacuated of instrumental calculations and pressures, I think. And so, yes, I'm very happy to report that since I've left academia, I've spent much more time on average each week doing this kind of good reading. So, and reading widely, stuff I like, stuff I don't like, stuff I know about, stuff I don't know about, catching up on some people or schools of thought that have been recommended to me for a long time that I never really got around to reading. Now I'm finally getting around to reading them. For instance, Christopher Lasch. People have been telling me to read Christopher Lasch for as long as I can remember. Ever since I started blogging, people say, read Christopher Lasch, you'll really like him. And I knew of him. I know vaguely his kind of position in intellectual history, but I never really read much or anything. And I've been reading him in the past week, and so that's been fun. I have some simple comments on that, nothing too deep. So yeah, that's kind of the game plan. And if as always, on these Thursday night sessions, if you have any questions, I'll be happy to take those. Michael James says, that cross in the background scares me. I bet your pattern would blow up if you performed a live post-exorcist exorcism. Um, yeah, well, I'm in a different room every time now that I'm on the run. So right now, I am actually in my grandfather's bedroom. Yeah. What else we got? Justin, why did you leave? You could have been my thesis supervisor. Hi, Gio. I'd be happy to be your thesis supervisor, but unfortunately, I don't think you were going to go to the University of Southampton, so I don't think too much is lost there. Watcher says that Russell thought Wittgenstein just copped out of serious thinking with his linguistic turn. Interesting take. I'm afraid I don't have extremely considered opinions about Bertrand Russell or Wittgenstein. I mean, so long as we're in the world of quick, cheap hot takes, I guess I'll just say briefly that I was unimpressed by Bertrand Russell's kind of anti-Christianity atheism arguments, or actually, if I'm being honest, I should say that when I read them, I was impressed because I was kind of in that direction I was moving of atheism and anti-Christianity. So yeah, I guess I was impressed, but in retrospect, I think that Russell's arguments against Christianity are pretty flimsy. That's just one unsubstantiated, flimsy assertion, but take it as you will. Wittgenstein, I have read a fair bit of Wittgenstein. I'm certainly no expert on all of his work, but I've read the Blue and the Brown notebooks, for instance, and I read the Tractatus. I didn't read the Investigations, his larger later work, so I can't really speak to Wittgenstein's kind of project as a whole over the course of his life. But my sense is that Wittgenstein is quite based in red pilled, personally. I actually, from what I know best, which is the earlier works, I think that yeah, Wittgenstein is quite based in red pilled, just because of the implication of a lot of his work that most of what philosophers are doing is kind of bullshit language games. That's obviously a kind of cartoonish takeaway, and philosophers or scholars of Wittgenstein will, of course, I'm sure say that that's a overly simplified cartoon image of Wittgenstein. But to the degree there's a kernel of truth in that, and I think there is a kernel of truth in that, I'm quite sympathetic to that kind of anti-philosophical thrust of at least some of Wittgenstein's work. So, for instance, a social scientist that I've always long admired, a kind of pretty radical left-winger type of social scientist, Pierre Bourdieu, is quite interested in Wittgenstein and cites Wittgenstein many times, because Bourdieu is also very interested in how a lot of the way that we use language is essentially just a kind of social competition game, and that basically class distinctions get encoded into kind of language competition, and a lot of what presents itself as impressive, moral, universalistic, philosophy or intellectual activity that's supposed to have a very noble or honorable and impressive character is actually just pretty empty language games that are really just essentially people competing for resources and domination over other people. So yeah, there's an interesting and I think quite compelling perspective that's sort of Wittgensteinian, sort of Bourdieusian, that I'm quite partial to. What else do we got? Is washing your hands respectability politics? Probably. Wittgenstein was banging one of David Hume's descendants. Is that right? Was that Pertuzzi? Jaunty Tip Lady says the musician Morton Feldman said the reason my music is limited is because I don't believe in Hegel. Is cancel culture too Hegelian? It's a good question. I think that's above my pay grade. I don't know if I have an answer. Wow, you guys are coming out with heavy hitting questions. You've often talked about the establishment of small communities. How would how would they militarily defend themselves? I'm not sure how exactly, but what I want to say is cryptographic nuclear weapons. All right. So let's carry on then with some news and updates. So first of all, a few things. One thing is I've made a substantial change, let's say, to my community governance structure, let's call it. As you know, I've hosted a Discord server for quite a while. And what a lot of YouTubers and kind of internet people do is they share a public link for the Discord, and people can just come in as much as they please. And I have, as many of you know, I've been wary of this, and I've kind of avoided that because the frank truth is that I don't just want anyone off the street, as it were, coming into my Discord server. I'm also not judgmental, and I'm not evaluating. Like I'm not elitist about it. I mean, I am an elitist in some domains or in some regards. But on this, I'm actually not elitist. Like I'm happy for basically anyone to come in who has any type of genuine interest in joining. However, I just want to create a little bit of a cost, just a slight cost of time, really, and energy to keep out the worst of the riffraff. And really, I just mean people who low effort trolls, really. And so the way that I've done that is I've required people to find me on some other platform and shoot me a message asking for an invitation. And that worked out pretty well. The drawback of it is that I was like frequently receiving messages on all different channels, and it got a bit overwhelming and took up a fair amount of time. So yes, freetards. Very good, Tim. Thank you for that. I'm trying to just keep out the worst of the freetards, basically. The problem is that by kind of raising the costs in this way of having people message me, it became very time consuming. And so after thinking about it, I thought there was a better way to do it, which is I am now putting up a public link that anyone can go to. So no one has to message me if they want to get into the Discord server. But that public link is not to the Discord server itself. It is to a long kind of entrance survey, which is not too long, but it's just long enough that if you're just a low conscientious person who's like clicking around the internet real fast looking for walls to piss on, it's just time consuming enough that a good number of those wall pissers will probably turn around. And so, yeah, it's basically the same idea, the same kind of structure I had in place, but now I don't have to receive different types of messages on different channels, which I sometimes take too long to respond to. So now when people fill out that survey, I just get an email, and then I can just respond via email. So yeah, so that's one bit of slight news. So if you're in the Discord server, for instance, I guess we might brace ourselves for a somewhat higher volume of intake from people. It won't quite be absolute anarchy of unlimited freetard influx, but it might be a little bit higher volume than so far. And the other implication is if you're not in the Discord and you want to get in the Discord server, there will now be peppered around the web links for you to just take the entrance survey, and then I'll bring you in. So yeah, for instance, there's a link now in the description of this live stream. So if you want to join the Discord, just click the link, fill out the survey, and yeah, then I'll get back to you. So that's one thing. Hidalgo asks, are you interested in cryptozoology or cryptids? I'm afraid to say, Hidalgo, that I do not know too much about cryptozoology. I'm interested, sure, I would like to learn, but I'm afraid I don't have too much to add on the topic. David Hume Pinsett, says Joshua Hansen. Wittgenstein dedicated the Tractatus to him. Oh, okay. Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I knew Wittgenstein was like fucking some dude, but I didn't know that it was a descendant of the David Hume. Yeah, that's interesting. Didn't he like didn't Wittgenstein also he went into the woods to make a cabin, didn't he? Did he do that with David Hume Pinsett and like a gay love uh a gay love like adventure of house building? Wittgenstein was from the second richest family in Vienna, and he taught at school and hit the kids. Yeah, I think a little corporal punishment is not too bad. I think I'm sympathetic to basic corporal punishment. You know, just like low level, simple hitting. You know, and obviously it has to be proportionate to the offense. But you know, my friend Diana Fleischman makes an argument that she thinks actually in romantic relationships and couples, people would actually be much happier and would save a lot of time if they allowed themselves to engage in low levels of physical violence, like slapping. She thinks that would be a net gain for people, and I'm kind of sympathetic to that rationale. And I think the same holds true for kids. Like when I was a kid, you know, I think it's much more humane to slap me on the knuckles with a ruler than make me sit in detention for like 1 hour after school. I think detention is actually more of a kind of human rights violation than simple corporal punishment. So I would say that the United Nations should really crack down on detention and do a big public campaign about the evil of elementary schools engaging in what is basically imprisoning students, and instead replace that with a policy of appropriately calibrated corporal punishment, which I think just makes more sense. All right, Geo says, Defu. Molly is now mad at you, Justin. Haha, violates the NAP. What the fuck are you talking about? I have no idea who Molly is, and I have no idea what the NAP is. So please clarify. Let's see. Watcher asks, did you start reading Land's Cryptocurrent? Yes, I did. Indeed. I read quite far along, and then I got busy with other things, so I'm way behind now. But yeah, that shit is very important, I think. I was only beginning to really grok it, but I grokked just enough of it to have a strong intuition that this will be significant. So I look forward to finishing it for sure. Let's see. Much like Lenin, he hit once and felt very bad later. That was kind of like my dad. Shout out to Kevin Murphy, by the way. My father, unexpectedly, has become one of the biggest fans of my live stream. Apparently, he watches like all of them. And so, Dad, if you're out there listening, thank you for your interest in my work. But this comment that was just raised makes me think of my dad, Kevin Murphy, because he basically hit us once or twice when we were very young. I remember being spanked, but only once or twice. And I think, if I recall correctly, his father was, you know, a very serious kind of military man. He was a career military officer and a real tough guy, you know, a real hard ass when he was young. And he was very strict with my father. And so I think my father basically, when he was a young father, and when the kids were young, my father tried to do basically what his father did to him. And I think my dad was also similar to what the person said in the chat, which is, I think my dad tried it and either felt bad or felt like it didn't really work. And for whatever reason, I'd have to ask him, you know, he didn't do it again. He stopped doing it. So yeah, there was a little bit of physical punishment in my childhood, but it was very short-lived, and for whatever reason, my dad gave it up. So, yeah, I wonder how I would have turned out differently had he kept that going. Maybe I would be more obedient. I don't know. Watcher says, so this is the left AC SJW teacher prohibition I've heard about. I have no idea what people are saying. Max asks, what are your opinions on anonymity on the internet versus skin in the game reputation? Yeah, well, I think most of you can guess that my philosophy, it leans towards being who you are and putting your name on everything. I think there are many benefits to doing that. I've talked about this a little bit here and there before. I don't think there's anything bad or wrong with anonymity. If that's a personal preference, it's perfectly fine. And throughout history, you know, perfectly good and valuable work has been done anonymously. And there's a way to do that and still also have a kind of significant impact. I think the problem is is that for really free speech to matter, for free speech to have effect, it has to be costly to the speaker. And I think this is intuited very early on in the history of Western civilization. You see this already in kind of the ancient Cynics, in this idea of defacing the currency that's associated with Diogenes. Foucault writes about the culture of radical free speech, to use a common parlance today, but what in the Greek would be called parrhesia. This idea of frank speech, of truly significant political free speech, requires that the speaker incur some kind of cost. There has to be some real risk. And so the problem with anonymity is that if you sufficiently insulate yourself from facing the risks of what you say, then people have a tendency and a defensible tendency to kind of dismiss it or to just not pay attention to it. Now, you might wager that if anonymity protects you and allows you to do thinking and writing over a longer period of time and more honestly and fully than you would be able to do with your name on it, then you could wager that those benefits would outweigh the costs. You know, that's confusing because I used the word cost differently just a minute ago, but that those benefits could outweigh the drawbacks, let's say, of remaining anonymous. So that kind of depends on your temperament. It depends on your strengths and weaknesses, I think. But if you're going to be anonymous, you better be able to do hard work over a long period of time and really build a body of work that is going to matter in the long run somehow, because that's the only way people will take you seriously. Whereas what is cool about putting your name on things is, yes, you do face more risks. Like if you let it all hang out and you say what you think and you take punishment for it, well, yeah, you might, have some kind of fall from grace or some kind of tumultuous social or political or career problems. But people pay more attention to that, and your words are more likely to have an effect, at least in some sense, in some context, in some kind of time horizon. So that's kind of the trade-off, I think. So there are times and places and All right. Am I back? Sorry, folks. My internet dropped out. I think I'm back. Someone say something in the chat if you can hear me and see me. Telling me I'm live, so yeah. All right, I might have to refresh the chat. So I think I'm live. It's telling me I'm live, but I can't see anyone saying anything, so hang tight. Oh, okay, cool. I think we're all good then. All right, sorry about that, folks. Man, that's the first time in all of my live streaming. That's the first time that the internet's ever totally dropped out like that, and I've actually disappeared and everything's shut down. So what did I miss? Did the chat stay open? That's kind of interesting. Like if I get disconnected, can the chat still live on? I guess it would, right? Why not? All right. I missed a lot. Oh shit. So Mac Vote says that he saw me on our stupid Paul, but the mods deleted the post. They were posting about my vampire tweet. Oh yeah, when I was talking about the eerie prescience of Mark Fisher's Vampire Castle. Yeah, everyone knows that. I think it's so funny, all the hand wringing about this because, yeah, I just think it's so funny. Like Mark Fisher in 2013 wrote that essay, basically kind of calling out SJWism before it went mainstream, and any smart person knows he was right. And people on the left, like all the decently intelligent people on the left, basically later, like years after, obviously when he wrote that, he got a lot of shit, and like the way things usually work out, only the stupid, kind of most regressive, nasty people spoke out, really, and all the smarter people who knew that Mark was, really, putting his finger on something important, mostly kind of kept to themselves, maybe supported him a little bit in private. I don't know the details, obviously, but this was before I became friends with him. But this is the way things always work. There's like someone tries to say something kind of courageous and point out a major problem in the left, and then the kind of rabid, reactionary, insane witch hunter cliques pounce. All the smart and honest people, they kind of placate them, or they're silent, and they step back and kind of allow the social justice warrior types to drown things out. But then over time, all the smart, like decently honest people, more or less kind of recognized, I think, that Mark was right and was making rather uncontroversial claims, really. And but what's funny is that the cycle keeps continuing, like it still happens, even though in private people say that he was right. And I find it extremely strange. Like, so for instance, with the Nina Power stuff, all the people I knew when I was friends with Mark and I was in Plan C and all of that, all those people, like, obviously were sympathetic to Mark. And yet the same thing, essentially the same structure reemerges around Nina Power in the UK radical left right now. And all the people who, after 2013, kind of position themselves in their own mind and to other people as kind of like pro Mark Fisher, smart, honest lefties who were kind of aware that the social justice warrior nonsense was getting out of hand. All of those people are, again, they just have nothing to say about Nina Power, or they're like silently kind of sympathetic to the witch hunters. And so, yeah, it's very perverse. I mean, these types of problems of just like structurally sociologically enforced patterns of cowardly silence. It's very sad because yeah, there's no amount of pointing at it and talking about it that really solves it. Anyway, I find it all very sad, which is why I'm happy to basically have no society. I'm basically out of society. I'm not like over and above it or anything like that, but I have no social investments really. I have friends. I have like a few friends. I've talked about this before. You only need like one or two friends in life, but those people have nothing to do with politics. I'm completely withdrawn from any milieu of politics. Therefore, I can just say whatever. And, you know, what else? Watcher says, I think today one needs to develop a plan to be memed or memeable. I don't know. I don't think you need a plan. I think you should think about, yeah, I think if you want to do intellectual work, you should think about how ideas do or do not travel. Can I comment on the similarities between the organizational structure of communism and the Catholic Church? Very good question. Yeah, communism and Catholic Church have the same exact structure. One leader, the true leader, closest to God, who enforces an absolute, universal, worldwide order of truth and equality. But, well, that's all. I'm not going into it. Obviously, I don't technically believe that exactly, but there is a kind of very strongly modified version of that statement that I kind of really do think. But the fact that SJW parents worry about their kids listening to Shapiro is hilarious. Yeah, that's funny. Let's see. Chamomile, what's up, Jacob? Asks, when are you going to interview Alex Jones? Dude, I would totally talk with Alex Jones. But the sad fact is that I am but a peon compared to Alex Jones. I'm sure he has he's much too busy and too famous for me, for little old me. Oh shit, Mac Vote is throwing shade. Are you ever going to get something real polished up on YouTube? Like, are you saying all my shit is not real and not polished? I mean, I agree most of it's not polished, but hey, I think it's pretty real. Yeah, sorry about that drop off. Right, okay. Who do you think might be the Martin Luther of the academic reformation? Wait, Mac, so who was talking about putting me on the sidebar? Like stupid Paul, are you talking about? I don't know what you're saying. Someone asked, what do I think about Empire by Hart and Negri? I think there's definitely worse left-wing political theory, but it's not especially impressive or interesting to me personally. I think it's interesting, but it's basically Empire has all of the problems, and these are deep problems that come from being kind of sociologically invested in two different worlds, one academia and two activism. So it kind of suffers from both. It's not really a significant academic work, and it doesn't really help, people actually trying to build anything. But it has all of the significant and pretty painful problems of works that are written in those traditions. In fact, this is actually something that I've been noticing more and more that now that I've left academia, like books that are written either for activists and in the activist scenes, or written in academia or for academic milieus. They pay such a large price in terms of, I don't want to say readability because that sounds cheap. That sounds like I want something easy to read. It's not a matter of easiness. I'm perfectly happy to work through extremely difficult texts The problem is that so much of the word choices, so much of the actual language in academic and activist texts has nothing to do with identifying some truth or expressing some truth or building out some kind of meaningful systemic connections, but it has to do with sociological work. It has to do with signaling alliances and affiliations and signaling a kind of a certain amount of cultural capital in a particular tradition. And, you know, this goes very deep. This goes extremely deep, to the point that, like, an average text today, like a blog post written by some activist, let's say, who's trying to do kind of like leftist theory, like let's say communist theory, for instance, take kind of contemporary communist theory, which I've actually been reading quite a lot recently because I've been trying to get caught up on it. I used to read this stuff quite a lot, set it aside for a while I was busy with academic stuff. Now I have time. It's one of the things I'm going back to, and I experience it very differently now, having gone through academia and then having left academia. It's just incredibly dense. And again, I'm not against density. The problem is what it's dense with. It's dense with essentially kind of analytically or intellectually useless signifier chains that really are a matter of, it's actually like purposefully inflated complexity. It's linguistically conflated complexity, not a complex model, not trying to provide a maximally sophisticated modeling of something going on in the world, but rather it's just purposefully made hard to read, because the activity of making your writing hard to read is itself a kind of intrinsic good within kind of small kind of like milieus where there's intense status competition. And in fact, status competition is one of the only things that's actually really going on there. And that's one of the reasons why a lot of these texts are just so dense with essentially useless verbiage and turns of phrase that that purposely make it really, really hard to read. And yeah, I think my radar for that has become much more effective, I think. And my kind of tolerance for it has become weaker, I guess, because I used to be in those kind of status games. I used to be in those milieus. So when you're in that milieu, you can kind of get mentally and emotionally invested in it because you're trying to compete in this word game also. But once you're out of that milieu and you don't have any kind of you don't have anything to gain socially from using these like incredibly dense, more or less kind of useless verbiage, your tolerance for it decreases significantly. And so, yeah. Oh, right. So I got onto this rant because you asked me about Empire. I think I've met Michael Hart. I met him once at Occupy Philadelphia, very briefly. I mean, we're not like buddies or anything. You know, I think he's very smart. I've never met Negri. I mean, they're both very smart, obviously, very thoughtful intellectuals. But yeah, Empire, I mean, it's one of these books that's just, because it has so much anchoring in kind of activist and also academic milieus. It has those kinds of social investments. The book I'm just not that interested in, I guess, books like that right now, I guess, is the truth. Yeah, so maybe someone who likes it more could say more about what's to recommend it. But I mean, if you want to know what it's about, I can tell you very briefly. It's kind of, you know, it's basically written in the context of the kind of anti-globalization moment in the late 90s. It's written roughly in that kind of, I forget what year it was written before or after that, but it's written roughly, it reflects roughly that kind of moment where there's all this kind of international, loosely organized, very loosely coordinated kind of international radical anti-capitalist protests and summits going on. Summit hopping is the term that was used at the time. You'd have people, radicals basically jumping around from Genoa to Seattle to here and there or whatever. There was a kind of period in which there was this emerging tendency of very loosely integrated radical anti-capitalist types of protests. And so, Empire is this attempt to kind of reconstitute political theory around an understanding of the new type of networked power that the essentially American empire kind of represents. It's not just America, although it's essentially a kind of American. It's essentially kind of American empire, but that operates through international institutions and this kind of dense internet, dense series of international linkages. That they try to basically describe and model this new type of networked political power that is empire, and try to delineate how that operates and how it functions. And I think there's a lot of truth to that basic kind of hypothesis, which I'm only very cursorily, recasting for you. There's a lot of truth to that. But again, it's like I said, it's like there are many ways to say that, some of which are more efficient than others. And a lot of good political science actually from well before then already, has a pretty strong grasp on this, like people like John Eikenberry, for instance. So a lot of it is kind of not very new, but it's in this new kind of networked, kind of radical anti-capitalist sort of vocabulary. And yeah, I don't really remember them adding too much value. Like I just don't remember. I don't remember taking much from it that really changed how I thought about things, or it certainly didn't produce the communist revolution or whatever. So that's, I guess, a mark against it, given that that's often kind of the goal of a lot of these types of theories. So I think that's all I'll say about empire. What else? What are the best questions? Oh, okay, right. So I've been ranting. There was a bunch of things I wanted to tell you all about that I should hit before we split for the night. If you have good questions, ask them. I'll try to squeeze them in, but otherwise, just a few things I needed to get in. One is that next week, or April 4th, next live stream, same time, same place, we are going to be test driving a new system. And it's actually developed by a fellow accelerationist. Basically, there's a guy who, or I assume it's a few guys, they're basically trying to develop a new kind of live stream chat technology. It's called Throne. If you want to Google it, you can Google it. I think the website is throne.live. And basically, they have an alternative to the YouTube chat that you all are typing in right now. They've developed a new alternative to that, which is very similar, and it works alongside the YouTube live streams, just like this one does. But the key innovation seems to be that it offers threaded chats. So the problem, the way they see it, is the problem with the YouTube chat is that it's just like, it's too fast. It's just people dropping a few lines and then they get lost, a minute later. And so their big innovation is threaded chats. So imagine the current chat that you're in right now, but imagine if people could respond and then it gets saved. And then you can kind of close the threads. And I believe that you can also vote on the threads, kind of like Reddit style upvoting, so that if someone says something in the chat and everyone else thinks it's a good point or a question or a comment that should get a lot of attention, then everyone can vote that up. And then it can be threaded. So basically it's a way of better managing the chat and making the live stream more sensibly integrated with the chat. So I told them that I would be happy to test drive it. They reached out to me asking me if I would test drive it. And it's kind of funny because the guy he said he's an accelerationist, and he said he kind of watches my shit a little bit. So it's kind of interesting that he's roughly, there are some weird kind of intellectual or even somewhat ideological kind of commonalities between, I guess, what I'm putting out and the idea behind the platform. I think he was probably just hamming it up a little bit to, make his pilot app seem interesting and attractive to me. But yeah, I'm sure he wasn't totally bullshitting. So, I think he said to me in his email to me, like, he's trying to accelerate live streaming or something like that, something funny like that. So I was like, yeah, sure, let's try it. So yeah, so same time, same place next week, Thursday night. but we're going to use the Throne app. So the live stream is still going to be just as it always is, done through YouTube. But instead of using this chat, use the Throne chat. And there's a link in my description of this video. If you go down to the description for this live stream, there's a link to my Throne, as it's called. And so bookmark it that or save it or whatever. And I'll remind you when we start the live stream next week. I'll remind you that that's where the chat is going to be. That's where my attention is going to be. So yeah, just bookmark it or sign up. I don't think you have to sign up. I think you can just sign in through YouTube or through Twitter or whatever. So yeah, it seems like it's designed pretty well, and I'm looking forward to test driving it. So Watcher says, tell them they should mirror their stuff on GitHub. Okay. No, I don't think you have to install anything. I think you just log in through Twitter. It's not an app on YouTube, I don't think. It's like its own website. So if you go to their, so there's a link, for instance, there's a link in my description here. If you click that, that's going to show you the video that I'm streaming through YouTube. It's embedded. And then there's going to be the threaded chat infrastructure alongside the video that I'm live streaming through YouTube. I think that's how it's going to work. So yeah, the link is in the description. Bookmark it, save it, whatever, and use that link. Go to that link next week when I do this. I'll post more information about that later. But yeah, so that's that. What else? A few other things. I already told you about the new Discord infrastructure. If you want to get in on that, link below. Another thing is that so I have spent a lot of time researching the best like workflow for the podcast, the audio podcast, because a lot of people have said they really value that and they really want me to get all the old live streams up on the audio podcast because it's so hard to listen to long stuff on YouTube. And if you might recall, some of you may or may not recall, but I'm very, exacting on myself, and I try to follow through on everything I ever say I'm going to do. When I first started my Patreon page, I put as one of the goals, I said I wanted to get to 50 subscribers on Patreon. And my goal there that I listed was if I could get to 50 subscribers, then I would be able to afford to pay for some kind of better solution for the podcast. I think I said something like either a pay for like an editor, someone, or some kind of like help with the audio engineering to kind of make that better and more reliable and kind of get that process sorted a little bit better, or some other solution. And I'm happy to say that I think figured out an excellent process for the podcast, which also is improving the quality significantly. So I know that a lot of my podcasts over the past year have been kind of shitty, like the audio, because I've had this workflow where I bring the audio from the YouTube live stream and put it to the podcast, but the audio from YouTube is pretty mixed. And and paying like someone to do proper audio editing is like a bit too rich for my blood at this moment, and it's way too time consuming for me to do personally. But I found this nice solution finally. I've been like looking for so long, and there's a website called Auphonic. I kind of want to. I'm not like sponsored or anything. I kind of want to give them a shout out though, because it's pretty awesome. It's quite cheap, and it's basically automated audio engineering. It's automated editing. And so they do like a small suite of basic edits on any audio, and it's all automated, and it's pretty damn good. So that's just something that I wanted to share, that basically I have finally kind of sorted out a new and improved podcast workflow that, one, is going to make it now possible for me to stay on a consistent podcast schedule. So I'm now pretty confident in being able to say I'll have at least one podcast posted every week. In fact, what I'm aiming for is to have about 1.5 podcasts a week, like maybe every 5 days or something like that. I'm going to try to post a podcast, so that way I can get caught up on the backlog of live streams and also get new live streams from each week posted as podcasts that week. And in that way, over time, I'll eventually be caught up and all the live streams will be available as podcasts. So yeah, Auphonic, it seems to work really well. So for instance, if you listen to my last podcast that I just dropped, which was an old live stream by Sonia Ellen Mann, I thought the audio sounds great. Like, I'm pretty impressed by the Auphonics, automated audio engineering. I'm hoping that they're all going to be that good, because it sounds, for YouTube audio, it sounds quite good. It's obviously not like perfect kind of fucking Sam Harris like audio quality or whatever, but it's damn good, and it's much better than what I was rocking. So yeah, so that's one thing I wanted to share, that I basically am finally following through on that first thing that I said I would do if I could get my patrons to 50. So yeah, more consistent schedule from now on, and higher quality, hopefully. So I'm happy. I'm very happy about that. And thanks for, all the patrons to, help me kind of improve all my stuff in this way. I obviously couldn't be spending money on, these different services if it wasn't for patrons. And so, yeah. Okay. What else? There was a few other things, nothing too big. One is that I integrated my website with the Brave browser. So some of you might be following this. It's kind of the Brave browser is a new browser that its main kind of claim to fame is that it's integrated with cryptocurrency and Ethereum, the Ethereum blockchain in particular. And so, I'm sorry, I'm thinking of a different one for MetaMask. The Brave browser basically has its own token that is then convertible to other ones or whatever. And basically their kind of interesting wager, their interesting model is that they will distribute a bit of money, a bit of the token, to creators based on how much their stuff is being used, basically. So you can, I don't know what uptake is like on this or whatever, and I'm not necessarily telling you to do it, because I don't really give a shit. I'm just trying it. I'm just trying it out. I'm basically, now that I'm kind of like flinging myself into the weird world of internet creator people or whatever. God, I hate that phrase. We need something better than if I call myself fucking creator or content creator one more time, my self-respect is seriously going to start diminishing. Either I or someone else needs to come up with a more dignified phrase of some kind that's not like, like narcissistic or long-winded either, which would be the other kind of failure mode, I think. So yeah, so I'm just saying I'm on there. So if you use the Brave browser and you read my website, it will. And actually, I think you can also. I think it's integrated with YouTube or something. Also, I haven't quite looked into it. I just looked into it enough to set it up and integrate my sites with it. So yeah, I'm on there. What else? Yeah, the other main thing is just that over the past couple of weeks, I've been putting a lot of time and effort into basically kind of redesigning and formalizing my attention and effort allocation portfolio. Let's say, like, I'm mapping out in a very detailed way, like how much time a week I'm going to spend writing, how much time a week I'm going to spend making videos, the projects I'm going to pursue in what order. And I'm really putting a lot of attention and care into optimizing all of that. And so that has taken me some time. And the irony is that I've been putting out a lot of podcasts and videos, but my writing and stuff like that and the book project is a little bit behind schedule. Well, not really, because there is no schedule, so I'm free as a bird. But the writing has been a bit on the back burner for a couple weeks, but that's because I'm trying to basically get my systems as a whole rationalized and supercharged. So I'm basically finishing that up, and I'm now hoping to more or less transition back into a kind of production and publishing schedule, let's say, that's more consistent and also more kind of voluminous and effective than ever, probably. So yeah, I'm very pumped about that. I'm very excited, and just thought I would share that. So also, Paul Hansel asks, are you going to do something with the Red Scare gals? And I have been talking with them finally. People have been telling me forever to go on their show or get them on the live stream. And yeah, I never, I have a lot. Whenever someone tells me to talk with someone, I put them in my notes. I have a long list. So I take those sort of requests very seriously, and I appreciate them a lot, because it's really useful to have a really long list of people to look to talk with in the future. But I usually just put stuff on the master list. until it kind of comes back in my mind, or there's like some reason for remembering it, or whatever. And so yeah, I definitely had them on my radar for a while. But just like most content requests I get, just it was just, they were just sitting on my list. And then with the stuff with Nina Power kicked off, and I think that was what made me and start talking with them. I forget how it went down, but Nina, with the stuff with Nina Power, yeah, I think basically they retweeted something that was like pro Nina Power and or anti Luke Turner. I think that might have been the common thread there. And I ended up chatting with Dasha at one point about like Nina Power or Luke Turner or whatever. And yeah, so it looks like we're gonna do some kind of collaboration. I'm not sure yet. We have to hammer out the details, but she said she was game. I'd be happy to talk with them. So yeah, hopefully we'll work something out, and I'm sure it'll be fun. But I don't have any details on that yet. Yeah, they hate Luke. So I'm curious. I'm definitely curious to hear their takes on it all, for sure. Thanks for St. Martin posting those links in there. That's good. Yeah, there you go. Right. What else do we got? Any other news? I think we're about at the top of the hour. I think we can just wrap it up. So make sure you subscribe to my channel if you're not subscribed already. Thanks for hanging out as always. And yeah, these Thursday night live streams are only 1 hour, and I try to keep myself to that limit because my brain just starts to go mushy after about the 1 hour mark. I mean, I can go for like 3 hours at least, but you know, diminishing marginal returns. So, all right. Thanks as always. This is usually where I say you can reach out to me on Twitter if you want to get an invitation to the Discord, but I don't have to do that this time because the invitation is now open. You just have to follow the link in the description below. So yeah, thanks for hanging out, people. As always, I barely got to talk to you very much about what I've been reading lately, although I did get a little rant in about the communist theory that I've been reading. If you're curious what I was reading, by the way, I've been trying to catch up on there's a certain kind of, let's say, I don't want to say trendy or fashionable because this is a vanishingly small group of people who actually read this stuff. But there's, let's say, a kind of school of, or a few schools of contemporary communist theory, let's say. And I've long been wanting to catch up on them. One, you know, for instance, EndNotes, for instance, is a well-known group, and another one would be it's escaping me. There's a few, but yeah, these people are often associated with what is called communization theory, which is just a very you know, it's a buzzword pretty much. It doesn't actually refer to too much substantively, but I wanted to catch up on a lot of that, so I've been reading that. And actually, most of what I wanted to say about it, I said in my comments on Empire, even though that's not the same thing. I'm not conflating those two. The problems are quite similar. It's very hard to read this type of work at this point in my life. I have very little patience for it, I find. But what's interesting is that I'm all the more resolved to push through it, because I do actually want to bring myself up to speed with it, and I actually am going to do the hard work of slogging through this like unnecessarily complicated, complexified social signaling tradition, because I want to really give my best effort to getting up to date on what these people are saying and thinking, even if I think that a lot of it is, you know, plagued with all kinds of sociological and aesthetic and intellectual perversions. It seems like a fair word, in my opinion. So yeah, that's that. Do post what you're reading on the Discord, says Watcher. Yeah, I can do that. Well, as I was saying before, I have an increasingly kind of sophisticated content planning and scheduling system that I've developed over the past couple weeks. So I have like multiple spreadsheets of what I want to write, when I want to write it, and what order I want to write it. And So yeah, this will probably find its way into that, but we'll see. So yeah, let's wrap it up. Thanks, folks. I'll be on here same time, same place next week. And as I said, we'll use the Throne chat app on the side. So later, folks. See you around. Oh shit.